Hello. Today we're going to have some fun. This vlog, it's comparing, it's 40 years, right? And during that 40 years, I have lived with lots of Land Rovers and lots of Toyota Land Cruisers, and I'm going to make a comparison of my life with the two. Now, I have to say right up front, I am not a fanboy of each, and I can prove it. Whenever I have done a video comparing the two, I get an equal number of people saying, "Ha, you're a Land Cruiser fanboy, of course you would say that." And people would say, "Ha, you're a Land Rover fanboy, of course you would say that." That is proof that I'm not a fanboy. I'm not a fanboy of Toyota. I really like the 79 series. 70 series, 78, 76 included. But I don't love them. I don't worship them. I love old Land Rovers, particularly Defenders, and, as you can see behind me, particularly old Range Rovers. Love them. They're not perfect, either of them. They're not perfect. In fact, they all have serious flaws. And I'm going to now make a comparison, given my years of experience with both. And this is meant to be fun. Please don't take it too seriously. Please comment. If you disagree with something I've said, please comment. Disagree with me. That's why, that's good. Personal insult, I'll kick you off before you can blink. Okay, but I do say, watch the video first, please. Then comment. This is going to be fun. Get yourself a coffee or something. I've actually got my coffee right here. I'm not going to be drinking it. I'm going to be talking. It is a revolution in DC power distribution. I have owned 19 four-wheel drives during the last 40 years. My first was a Range Rover, and I was obsessed with Land Rover. Was I a Land Rover fanboy? Yes, in every possible sense. So I know what it's like to be a fanboy. Okay. I have owned now more Land Cruisers than I have Land Rovers. Now, all the Toyotas that I have owned have been Land Cruisers. They include 70 series and 100 series, those two. I have used both Land Rovers, Range Rovers, Land Cruisers, both 100 and 70 series for expeditions. I've also owned them in environments where I use them as daily drivers and just everyday cars. And in both cases, I've had to maintain them, prepare them for trips, drive them. And then when I'm out in the wilderness, I always notice another Land Cruiser or another Land Rover. I notice them immediately. In fact, I notice them when I'm driving around. I notice vehicles that I like Suzuki Jimny. I think it's a fantastic little thing. I notice things like G-Wagons. I love the G-Wagon 461 series, and I'll mention it every now and again during this. But I have no interest in the 463 and 5 series G-Wagons, because the interesting thing about the G-Wagon is that they, unlike most vehicles that take a road vehicle and then adapt it for off-road, Mercedes-Benz did it the other way around. They took an off-road vehicle, the 460 series G-Wagon, and they converted it to an on-road version of it, and it was the 463, and as it's evolved through the years, like so many vehicles like it, it's become more and more and more and more on-road and less and less and less off-road, even though it still has solid axles. They're no good overland, and because of their big wheels and low-profile tires, they're hopeless off-road. Hopeless. Forget it. Walk away. You know, low-profile tires is the big problem. And because large rims and low-profile tires look good, most off-road vehicles with those equipped are not good off-road at all, and hopeless at overland because the tyres give in. When you load them heavily, reduce pressures for off-road and gravel road use, the tyres fall apart, so they're hopeless. One of the things that Land Rovers, and when I use the word Defender, when I use the word Defender, I'm talking about the pre-2016 Defender, the proper one. That's what I'm comparing. If I talk about the new Defender, and I'll mention that a bit, I will say new Defender. If I say 70 series Land Cruisers, I'm talking about all the Land Cruisers that I have had experience with, and of course they started making those in about 1984, give or take a year or so. And the 70 series is now currently built. It's built in Japan, and it's also built in Portugal. Of course, Land Rover Defender no longer made, okay, which is one of the great tragedies as far as I'm concerned in the world of motoring. The other tragedy, similar, committed by exactly the same company, Jaguar Land Rover, or Land Rover Jaguar, and Jaguar, their new politically correct range is apparently their sales have dropped by over 90%. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Another great tragedy. Ineos, of course, they've come in with a vehicle that they have said the spiritual successor to Defender, and my opinion of that briefly is that while I'm impressed with the car, no question about it, like all of these vehicles, it has some flaws, quite serious ones, but they all do in a way. It's not a spiritual successor to Defender because it's too expensive. It's the same price as a Land Cruiser 300. Very expensive, given what it was supposed to be. That's my opinion. I want to talk about the way fans work, way Land Rover fans and Land Cruiser fans. They behave in a different way. You would think that they're very similar, but they're actually not. This video was inspired by a chap I met in Zimbabwe, and he had a lovely, I would say it's a 2014-15 Defender with Puma motor in it. Had the Alucab, what do they call the lift? I know the Hercules on the Troopy, and they've given it another name for some reason on Defender, and they had that on it, and we had a nice chat about vehicles. And he said to me, on the morning after, one of his vehicles because we were in Chisarewa National Park, and one of his Land Cruisers broke down in our campsite. They came to visit us, say hello, and it broke down. And Cameron and I tried to help them, and we did actually eventually get it started again. The following morning, this chap heard about it and said, well, he was a bit worried about it. And I said, don't worry, we could help. We were there, we could help. We had tools, didn't worry us. And he said, oh, these Land Cruisers. He's something like this, I paraphrase. I thought that I was going to get some really, really reliable vehicles when we got these Land Cruisers, and it turns out they're not reliable at all. I mean, take my Defender, for example. It's been faultless. It has been the perfect car since the day I got it. It has been absolutely faultless, totally reliable. And I said, that's fantastic, And then he kind of said, oh yes, there was one occasion, the engine blew up, but they replaced it. And he dismissed the idea that the engine blew up as if it was nothing. Now, that's a very Land Rover fan boy thing to do. I can almost guarantee, and this is the fanboys will say, oh yeah, the steering box packed up, but that. The fact that it means that it was no longer an inconvenience, it was no longer a reliability issue, it was something else. Most reliable vehicle in the world. Now, we'll always use the word trusty, my trusty Land Rover. Even though it's broken down 130 times in a year, it's still called their trusty Land Rover because of their relationship with the vehicle. Now, you must understand It is true that Toyotas, generally speaking, are more reliable than Land Rovers. They're not super things. They will break. If you don't look after them, they'll break down. They'll stop working. Now, this particular Land Cruiser that broke down, it was a pure maintenance issue. Pure maintenance issue. The battery was loose, and it was sitting there on these Chisorera roads. Terrible. They're just tracks. They're not roads. They're tracks. And the battery was being held down by its cords. No bracket at all. So the brackets, the battery's sitting doing this. And what is it doing? It's wearing away the cable. One of the earth leads had snapped. That's why it had broken down. A big, thick earth lead was this rosette of iron as it had been worn. That's why the car broke down. It didn't break down because Toyota didn't know how to build the car. It broke down because he didn't know how to maintain it. He's expecting his Toyota Land Cruisers to perform as well as his Land Rover, but his Land Rover is well maintained and looked after because it's his passion project, and the Land Cruisers are left to rot. They're going to break down. We all know that Land Rover has never made particularly reliable vehicles, but they have made vehicles that perform as good, if not better, than any other off-road, on-road vehicles produced anywhere by any manufacturer. The pain is that their reliability is questionable. And the reliability of Toyotas, is it questionable? No, it's not really. It's not as if they are perfect. It is if they are of a higher standard. And I think the whole world will recognize the fact that they are of a higher standard. It is possible, like it is with the Land Cruiser, to prepare it for overland use, to tweak it and get it right for good, effective overland use by doing some stuff. The stuff that you do with Land Rovers is not the same as you do with Land Cruisers. That is why on the forums you will see Land Rover people, what do I do when? How have you repaired, have you fixed, have you sorted the following problem? Just go and have a look at New Defender forums. It's a joke how troublesome those cars are. But the reason why the reason why people still buy them and want them and consider them desirable is because they perform so well. They are very, very good performers. Go and drive a New Defender. Now, its electronics means it's forget it, Overland. Forget it. Forget it. Because if you have a minor problem, and let alone, I mean, God forsake, a major problem, you need a helicopter to get the car out there because you can't tow it. I won't do another video about that, but you cannot tow, even for a short distance, a New Defender. The old Defender was magic in that it was so basic and simple and practical and livable, like a 79 still is. And slowly but surely moving more difficult because of the electronics. That is true, it is. But compared performance between Land Rover and Land Cruiser. Off-road, Land Rover Defender is better than the 70 series. Why? Because it has better axle articulation and it has better clearance because it doesn't have great big spring hangers hanging off the back axle. It has coil springs, therefore a longer wheel travel, which is good and bad. In most off-road situations, extra wheel travel is good. But for side slopes, where it's not that good, because if you have a heavy-duty stabilizer bar, it stops actual travel, but if the vehicle is at a lean, it also stops it from hanging and then reducing lots of weight on the inside wheels, okay, on the upper wheels. That is a function of a stabilizer bar, All right, you got a heavy one in, it doesn't lean as much, you get better traction on all four wheels. So there's a double-edged sword there. If you have light stabilizer bars, it will be less safe on road, and only in some, perhaps most, but not all, off-road conditions, it will be better. And if it's better off-road in most conditions, then it's probably going to be worse on-road in most conditions. So these vehicles are a balance. And off-road, Ineos is better or worse than Defender. It's better. It's better than Defender because it's got heavier anti-roll stabilizer bars. Much, much heavier, which means it's flatter on the road. But it's a compromise. It does lean quite a bit when compared to, well, that's it. I've seen reviews, people saying, oh, it's a tractor. Well, I've seen the word tractor used with Defender, Land Cruiser 70 series, and Ineos. People calling it a tractor. That's because they've climbed out of a Land Cruiser 300 or whatever, okay, modern station wagon and an off-roader like they are, and compared it with a pure off-roader. These three vehicles are pure off-roaders. They do very well, particularly Ineos and Land Cruiser, do very well on-road. Defender does not. Remember, old Defender, not new one. The new Defender cannot be categorized with these two. It's not an off-road car. It's an on-road car with some off-road ability. Whereas these vehicles are off-road vehicles. That is why when you climb into an Ineos or a 79, it's a bit agricultural. It is possible to get and I've done it with my Australian troop carrier. I have put in the kind of shock absorbers, other suspension modifications, sound insulation, etc. And that thing drives amazingly smoothly. Really, it's comfortable. The seats, the standard seats are shite, unlike Ineos, which has very, very nice seats. I think too nice. That's one of the things that has shot the price up. But anyway, very, very nice seating. And it is therefore what Ineos has done is they have taken the compromise of off-road. We want a really, really good off-road ability car, and we are moving it on-road as far as we dare. And what are we going to do with that? We're going to put in efficient sound insulation, and we're going to put in really nice seats. That's not a bad way of going, because the chassis is an off-road chassis. No question about it. Okay, but so is the 79, and so is Defender. It is possible to get a Defender by doing the same thing, almost, but as nice to drive as a 70 series Land Cruiser. By doing the same thing, sound insulation, you need a lot of it in Defender, and get the springing and suspension right, and you can actually, it's quite an expensive exercise. Even more expensive with Land Rover, because you have to change the stabilizer arms as well to make any real progress. But the point is, it's possible. But with Land Rover, you don't have to, if you want to take it to the next level, change that absurdity that is associated with the 70 series Land Cruiser, the narrower rear axle. It's an absurdity that you still build that vehicle. Even now in 2025 with the 224, was it 23, the 2.8. The 2.8 engine in the 70 series chassis is great. It does the job really, really well. It's not as interesting as a V8, as I've mentioned, but it does the job. It's lighter, it's a little bit better on fuel, it's more practical, it's a good job, and you left the axle the same width. And that is really annoying because it feels so unnecessary. Remedy, fit, offset wheel rims, spend a bit more and do a conversion, even more replace the axle. It's expensive. But now, let's have a look at what we've got to do with a Land Rover to get it right. And I have a theory. Why are the Puma Land Rovers so unreliable, engine-wise? My theory is this, and I have no evidence to back this up, but that same engine is used in Volvos and many Ford cars that are not unreliable at all, necessarily. And yet they put that same engine in a Defender and it becomes, it's serious liability for that vehicle unless it's sorted. And my theory is that it is the ancillary equipment. For example, with my Defender, the radiator split because of a incorrect radiator cap. The gearbox went because of incorrect bearings fitted in the gearbox. The auxiliary equipment for Land Rovers, and this is why so many of them that blow their Puma engines and fit another one, and the second one also blows. Why is this? It's because the engine is actually quite a good one, and yet you put it in a Land Rover and it becomes a terrible one. It's another absurdity. I think Ford supplied them with reject engines and sold them to Land Rover really, really cheap, knowing that 1 out of 10 would blow up. It's a theory, it's not backed by evidence, and it's just my opinion. Very important that, before you start getting uptight about it. But why are they so unreliable? If it wasn't for that, actually the Defender wouldn't be a particularly unreliable vehicle, particularly the Puma. Just a thought. Why wouldn't I buy a Land Rover Defender now? Because so many people have said, well, if you love them so much, why don't you get one? Well, because prices have gone a bit silly. That's one thing, because they're desirable. Okay. I like the knowledge when I'm driving when I do solo trips. Reliability to me is very important. Very important. I kind of need that comfort that I know the vehicle is going to be reliable. And having a 500,000 kilometer Land Cruiser, if you had said to me, well, if you had a 500,000 kilometer Land Rover and Land Cruiser, which one is going to be, given the amount of work we did on the Land Cruiser, which one is at the end of the day going to be more reliable? The Land Cruiser is going to be more reliable. It just is, because its inherent build quality is better. Okay, I adored my Defender. We did trips on that thing, but if you have a look at these pictures, no roof rack, no load in the back. Here's the Achilles heel of Defenders, is that users overload them. And you guys watching this video, if you have, and the Icarus Alucab thing, and you have a roof rack on top of it with stuff on it, before you roll your car, take it off. There are so many tragic stories of Defender owners rolling their beautiful Defenders, and they're written off. If they fall on their sides, the roof is so weak, it just, that's it, written off. You've lost your precious car, you can't replace it because you overload it. And so many of you do it. I saw about a year ago in a Facebook post, tragic, he posted on my Facebook. I don't know, do I have a group? I think I do. I'm not very active on it. I don't like Facebook, but it was a tragic story. And I looked at the photographs of the car, and he sent him pictures of it on its side. I thought, mate, you did this. You did this. You. Because you had overloaded the roof rack. Defenders, by their nature, the solid axles, the coil springs, and the long travel nature of those coil springs, and the not particularly heavy duty stabilizer bar, means that they are subject to rollover. And he rolled over apparently at 3 miles an hour. He went through a ditch, misjudged it a bit, and the next thing, bang. C of G went a little bit too far and you're over. And I see them even today, a beautiful Defender with all of this stuff on the roof. Guys, stop it. Troopy people, you are doing the same thing. The Troop Carrier is more stable because of its heavier stabilizer bar, but less stable because already the factory troop carrier is top heavy as it comes out of the factory. Now we do a roof conversion, which is adding between 80 and 100 kilo. I reckon I have got a roof conversion, I've got an awning, and I've got a shower thing, and I can tell you now my additional weight from standard over that roof is probably sitting at 130 kilograms, between 120 and 130 kilograms. And I would like to put a solar panel on top. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. It would be stupid. Stupid! Not because of the weight distribution aft, which we've spoken of, but the weight distribution high up, which nobody seems to think. Nissan Patrol drivers, you are amongst the worst, and the reason why you do it is because your vehicles have such a good suspension, one of the best made. The suspension layout of the rear axle is such that the vehicle is amazingly stable. It's quite a heavy car, all right, so you don't have an advantage of weight, okay, and the standard roof loading on that vehicle is rated at 200 kilograms, which is higher than average, and you load the hell out of the roof rack. You can get away with it a little easier than Troopies and Defenders. It's true, you can get away with it because your vehicle is inherently more stable, very heavy stabilizer bars, etc. But a lot of you are driving very, very close to that limit. Now, while you're actually driving, it's absolutely fine. You're happy as Larry. And then, bang, you're on your roof. Can I have another Coke? And the next thing, you're on your roof. And it's not through bad driving, lack of driving skill. It's through lack of common sense when loading your car. Get the weight off the roof or don't carry it at all. It would be safer if you pulled a trailer. It wouldn't be difficult to build a Defender because there is so much great equipment. But would I feel at home, would I feel comfortable, at ease, doing solo expeditions in an old Land Rover? With my old Land Cruiser, I do feel comfortable. Would I feel as comfortable? No. And I'll give you the reason why. I remember a trip in, and if you're still with me, well done. Hope you're enjoying it. In 2000, I was driving a G-Wagon. My mate Steve Searle in South Africa, I was living there at the time, was driving a Defender 110, a V8. I knew the car quite well, and I had some good friend John Rich in his Colt L200, and very, very sandy tracks through the desert. And we found that the two of us found that Steve was lagging so far behind, and got to the campsite, and he was going a lot slower than us. And I was chatting to him, and he said, "I'm battling through the sand." He said, "No, I'm battling. I'm just battling." And he was using copious amounts of fuel, frightening amounts of fuel. Really, really struggling. And I said, "Have you locked the center diff?" He said, "What? Well, what do you mean?" I said, "The center transmission. Have you locked it?" "Oh, no. No, why would I do that?" See, he didn't understand. I said, you're driving in all-wheel drive. You're not driving in four-wheel drive. You're driving in all-wheel drive. What do you mean? Well, you've got to, I don't know if you lift one wheel, all of that stuff. I didn't understand that. Lock the center diff. Lock it. If you're doing very, very tight turns in a car park, just unlock it to do the tight turns so you can do tight turns. When we're on these sand tracks, just lock it. You lock it on the go, bang. Just lock it while you're driving. Bang, lock it, unlock it. Okay, that's the beauty of the system. Lock it and unlock it while driving. And the next day he said, "Oh, it's chalk and cheese, just absolute chalk and cheese. The car's just perfect." Okay. He said, "There's an interesting thing." And this was 6 years later. We were driving together, and he was my camera operator on an expedition I did in the Kalahari, and I was driving my second Land Cruiser, 105. We were driving through equally tough sand. Mike Main, our guide, was driving an 80 series with a 1.8Z in it, and really really deep sand in the southern Kalahari, and my 4.5 was using similar amounts of fuel to Steve's Land Rover V8. Copious amounts of petrol through this thick sand, and it was just cruising through this thick sand. And he said to me, Steve, sitting next to me, and he said, you know the difference between Land Rover and Toyota ownership? He said, you haven't mentioned your car once in the whole trip. You haven't talked about your car once. You haven't talked about the gearbox once. You haven't talked about the engine temperature once. You haven't talked about your car at all. Mike doesn't talk about his car when he gets out of it. I said, yeah, we don't. They just work. And that is the difference. But you must understand, Land Cruiser owners, I'm saying this to you, because you will look at this idea and shake your head, and you will say, I don't understand it. Why wouldn't you want a vehicle that was really reliable? No, the psyche of a Land Rover, and I've been there, I know that, I was one. The fact that you could get this vehicle through this really tough terrain, keep it running, maintain it, check it, talk about it, bonnet open, check this, check that, make sure it's just, okay, it's part of the experience. Just getting in and drive it a bit and get out of it, to them is dead boring. As a result, Land Rover owners have, and I'm not saying Land Cruiser owners don't, but more, Land Rover owners have a relationship which is more than just man and machine. It's man and machine on a more spiritual level than happens with Land Cruisers. They feel at one with their car. Their car becomes part of them. Believe me, I know this. I've been there. I have done that. With both my first Range Rover and my second four-wheel drive, which was my Defender, there was this kindred spirit. Now with my Range Rover, when I eventually sold it, it was heart-wrenching. It was soul-destroying. I had sold a member of my family. But I had woken up from a bit of a nightmare, because the amount of work required to keep my old Range Rover running was those damn axle bearing seals, hub seals. Oh man, the brakes would get oil on them. Then endless electrical problems. Yeah, it was a suffix A Range Rover. It's going to be troublesome. My Land Rover was not as troublesome. But it was easier to sell my Land Rover Defender. It was a better car, it performed better, it was more reliable, it was newer, okay, but it had 127, I think it was, 1,000 kilometers when I sold it, and it was easier to sell because I hadn't got that emotional attachment to it, because it had done better, it had just worked. I have had no emotional attachment to any of my Land Cruisers at all. And for you Land Rover people now, you will say, well, what's the fun in that? I love my Land Rover. It's a different way of vehicle ownership. We respect them for different things. Don't discount it and say that a Land Cruiser has no soul. It has no soul to you. It has much, just as much, to its owners. But it's less frequent. Fewer Land Cruiser owners have that soul attachment with their cars as with Defender owners, particularly Defender owners. And Nissan Patrol owners, you are somewhere in between. You have I think a lot of you, if I'm right, tell me, a little bit more of a closer relationship with your vehicle than it would be if it was a Land Cruiser, and you might regard the Toyotas are a bit soulless. Well, why are they soulless? In a way they are a bit. They can be, and often are, regarded as an appliance. I don't regard my Troopy, either of my Troopies as appliances. I don't have an emotional relationship with them like I did with my Land Rovers. I have not had an emotional relationship with a car since I sold my Defender. I would prefer a car that just works, because now I have an intimate relationship with the idea of being in amazing remote places. So the places and the connection with nature and wilderness is more important to me now than the machine that takes me there. Make no mistake, I enjoy the machine. I love fiddling with the machine and getting it just right and playing with it like I do on a Saturday morning. Yes, I do. But it's not emotional. And because I sell my vehicles after 2, 3, sometimes 4 years, I do miss them after I sell them. I do. But it's more about the adventure experience than it is about the mechanical experience. That is the primary difference between these two vehicles. The traditional way of wiring up DC installations is dead and buried, because everything you see there in a traditional installation has been replaced by that. Because every component shown here is replaced by the Egon DC hub, because it eliminates the need for lugs, crimps, heat shrinks, and it eliminates the need for expertise. All those replaced with a screwdriver. What's more, built into every Egon DC hub is instant fault finding. It's a revolution. Visit egon.com.au to find out more.